Hi everyone, you're watching Janesville Community Page. This is Yuri Rashkin, and we are here at the Italian House for a listening session on guns and school safety. I'd like to say, first of all, thanks to Edmund and everyone at the Italian House for hosting this event. And I also want to thank our elected officials who are here today with us, as well as folks who are here to share their concerns, hopes, and wishes with elected officials. Here with us today we have Rock County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor-elect Tom Bryan. We have our state representative, Deb Kolsty. We have State Senator Janice Ringhand, Janesville Police Department Chief David Moore. We have Janesville City Councilman Jim Farrell. We're expecting more elected officials to join us, and we shifted into a kind of a round table. So we're going to begin with having our elected officials make an opening statement, and then afterwards we're going to go to folks that are here to speak their mind, their concerns, their worries, and their hopes and their wishes. Thanks so much for being part of this event, and let's begin. So, shifting the camera, and Jim, would you like to get us started? Councilmember Farrell, thank you so much for being here, and what's on your mind?
Thanks a lot, Yuri, and thanks for this opportunity. As we've all seen in the news recently, I think young people are making their voices heard more than ever that we've got to have safe schools. I think it's a responsibility of federal officials, state officials, and city officials to make sure our students are in schools that are safe. They can go there every day and know that we care about their safety. So I'm here to hear other people's ideas about what can we do, especially locally, to further this agenda of safe schools. And I am more than willing to hear what students have to say and administrators and so on of what we can do to move this forward.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Farrell. Rock County Supervisor Tom Bryan, is there? The microphone is yours, so to say.
Well, number one is I thought this was going to be a listening session, so I was more here to hear what the students have to say. But as I've stated before, I'm really enthused about the way that the students are today. They're being informed of the issues, and then they're taking action. And so, sometimes you wonder how secure our future is going to be. Well, with the students that we have today, I'm really excited about what our future will end up. As a side note, I've got two grandsons that are 14 that go to school over in Michigan, so they're going through a lot of the same struggles that we are here. And from what I've seen so far with the Janesville School District, especially with Craig and Parker, that they're being very proactive, and they've got a lot of things that are in place to work on the situation. I know it's a good joint effort between Chief Moore and the Janesville Police Department, the school district, and the school board to implement a lot of things. So hopefully we never have to worry about that here in Janesville, but they've got a lot of the things in place to take care of it if we do.
All right. Thank you, Tom. And why don't we go next to Senator Ringhand?
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you for inviting me here today. I think it's such a timely matter that we've all been paying a lot of attention to. Most recently, it's been around for longer than any of us would like to have to acknowledge that school shootings, public shootings have been an issue. But now it seems to be coming to a head. And at the state level, we just had our last session a couple of weeks ago, and the bill came up that would address school safety as far as grants so that schools could get additional security procedures, pay for extra mental health care, but it totally ignored the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that was gun control. And we did bring forward several options that we had amendments for to add to the bill, such as disallowing the bump stocks, 48-hour waiting period. Anyone who's had domestic abuse issues could not get a gun, universal background checks. Everything that we have heard from public safety, from teachers, from students that they feel to be very, very important, all of those amendments failed, which was very disappointing. that they were considered to be non-germane to the bill of school safety, meaning it wasn't important, which I totally disagree with. And like County Board Member Brian, I have 2 high school grandchildren that attend Evansville schools. The week before we had our last meeting, there were 2 terroristic threats at that school. They didn't say exactly what they were, just that they were terroristic threats. And I have 2 grandchildren there. I stated on the floor of the Senate that this was the start of the conversation, not the end of it. We need to take serious measures. We were told that the Senate was not the place to resolve this. Strongly disagree with that. Our state government needs to play a very active role in this. So I'm happy to be here today to listen to people, what they have to say, and hopefully can learn better ways of dealing with this. Thank you.
Thank you. State Representative Goldstein.
Thanks, Yuri, and it's a pleasure to sit at a table anytime and listen to students because they've been so passionate about this issue. I'm just going to kind of go over what we did pass as a state. The biggest portion of the bills that we passed were called school safety, but really they were putting $100 million kind of at the status quo. So $100 million went for schools to bid for in grant programs. I don't know how much the school district of Janesville would benefit from that because I think we have a lot of things, cameras, locks. We already have the police presence in the school, so we don't know what the grants will go for. There's been no stipulations. We know that it'll be distributed to 3,000 plus school districts, both public and private. So we actually don't know. There haven't been any parameters for what they'll do. It started out that they were going to use 4 full-time employees to get these grants out the door. It was scaled back to 1 person in the office of DOJ to go through all these grants and decide where the money should go. So that was probably the biggest piece. But I think anybody knows that there's really, this has got to be more than one approach. And school safety through enforcement is good, but we also, and when I talked to the teachers and the superintendents the day of the student walkout, one of the biggest things is how could we get some mental health services in the school district so that children that need those services could actually go and get some help. And also we actually do need to take a look at the gun laws. There are just some common sense things that I call them common sense. People would argue with me, but there's no reason we can't have universal background checks. If you believe in background checks, you should believe in universal background checks. So those 3 things should go hand in hand: school safety, mental health, and reasonable gun laws. So I'm interested in hearing what the students have to say and answer any questions about the bills that we actually did get passed.
Thank you, and we're definitely going to have a round table or rectangular table conversation. So, Chief Moore, thank you for being here, and go ahead.
Certainly. Thanks, Yuri, for bringing us all together to discuss this important topic. I can tell you that law enforcement works tirelessly at the active shooter response, and Janesville Police Department, along with the Rock County Sheriff's Department and other law enforcement agencies in Rock County, we work collaboratively and we stand ready to respond to those active shooter events. In the Janesville School District, we also have Operation Direct Connect. We learned after Sandy Hill shooting that those seconds of getting a police officer there is so important. And so we issued a radio to every school in Janesville, and administrators can come up on that radio immediately and go direct with every police officer that's on duty, and we start that response immediately. And we know that every second can save lives. We also have casualty care in our classrooms. All of our teachers are trained in how to provide care to wounded students and wounded teachers. What I want to suggest to you, if you're expecting active shooter training and Operation Direct Connect, and casualty care to be the answer, we've already lost the battle. Where we need to do our work is connecting with our students and finding out the information about these potential shooters before the event ever happens. In almost every school shooting that has occurred in this nation, people knew ahead of time that this person was dangerous, that this person was threatening harm, that this person could be a school shooter. Every one. In almost all of our mass shootings that have happened in this nation, there were clues as well. But people decided not to call. About the only anomaly is the Vegas shooting. There weren't as many clues there as best we know. So we work in this arena as well. We have Operation Safe Schools, where law enforcement and schools and social workers and the DA's office and others get together, and we talk about those kids that are coming up at risk in hopes of avoiding tragedy. Our crisis intervention team officers are working very closely with the school district because we see things out in the field that may give meaning to the schools, and we want to improve that relationship and see if we can interdict at that level. We are just recently starting a project called Handle with Care. And what we're doing with Handle with Care is we know that children that suffer trauma at the home, it can affect their schoolwork. So we're sharing with our school professionals information that we know from officers out in the field, so that next day when that child comes to school, school administrators and school teachers can know that child suffered some trauma the day before. But if I don't leave you with any other thought, I want you to leave you with the see something, say something discussion that's going on. This is so important. Students know a lot of information, and they need to share it with a trusted adult. They need to share it with law enforcement, because we can intervene and make a difference. We get that information. Sometimes it comes in through Crime Stoppers. Sometimes it comes in through a phone call to the police department. We will get our school liaison officers up in the middle of the night, and we're out there talking with those students and making sure that school is safe the next day. 2 weeks ago, we had a student on Snapchat indicate that she wanted to commit suicide. That Snapchat went out to 30 other kids. One called us. One student had the courage to give us a call. And those numbers we need to turn around. We got to get to a position where 29 students are giving us a call, not one. And when we get there, I think we're going to be far more successful in taking care of school shootings in this nation.
Thank you, Chief. Well, let's turn it over to everybody else who's not elected official or working for the City of Janesville. Suzanne, would you like to begin? If you could just introduce yourself as you're speaking, that would be great.
I'm Susanna Buckland. I'm a senior at Parker High School here in Janesville, and a few people here have recognized that I was hosting the town hall with Randy Bryce and Rep Pocan on Saturday. So I'm just here to share my thoughts and sort of get information. I've been really involved in March for Our Lives and the 50 Miles More rally I attended and student walkouts. So I just came here to get information and to share my opinion as a student.
So what is your opinion as a student?
My opinion is we need to do something, because I shouldn't have to be scared at school that the loud noise down the hallway could be a gunshot.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I'm Olivia Beege, and basically the same thing what she said. I don't want to go to school and be worried about something going to happen to me. I want to be safe and learn. And people need to speak up if they hear anything about somebody doing something.
Tom Beachy, I'm her father. I was on my way home from work, actually, and my wife told me about this, and we're supposed to meet a lady here that she wants to start a program. And my daughter works at this lady's horse farm, and so we're kind of waiting for her to show up, and because I think she wants to start a program for kids to come out and work on the farm. So
She messaged me and said she'll be here around 5. So
Oh, is
you're a little early,
Is her
yes,
name
but other than that,
Portia?
you're great.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. How do you feel about your daughter going to school and
Yeah, I mean, I've been out of high school for almost 30 years already, but I grew up in Baraboo and we never had to worry about this. Yeah, it's just, and like Police Chief Morris said, I had good information. So, yeah, it's just, I never knew what a bump stock was until I think it was that Las Vegas thing. So,
Can I ask a question of the two
yes,
students?
by all means.
So what's the climate like at, what school do you go to?
Craig,
Craig? So now we have a Parker and a Craig. What's the climate like? Is there, I mean, right after, I assume there's a fear, but has that already dissipated? Or is there still a sense of fear that somebody might be a loner and want to do harm to students?
I feel like in the media there's definitely the stereotype of like, oh, that weird kid, and typically like a white male. And some people I have heard said like, oh, like that stereotype, and like making jokes about it. And so I don't know, that's a bit upsetting. After the incident in Parkland, after that shooting, we talked about it in one of my classes. For the most part, it's the media cycle of like 2 or 3 days, and it's on the news, and then it's sort of forgotten about. So then our school really ramped up the security measures as well. So it's hard to say, because some students have been feeling more anxious about it, and then some are just like, oh, it keeps happening, whatever.
And what about it, Craig?
same thing about Craig. There's people have anxiety about it, and I mean, if you bully somebody, that pushes them kind of over the edge to do something. But
So have you noticed that there's a tendency to try to, so one of the things that the state tried to do is put in some anti-bullying, some money for anti-bullying. Do you think that filters down to those that are most at risk of being alienated, or those programs? Have you had any anti-bullying programs at school?
yeah, we have.
Yeah, in the past I have, especially since I went to Milton schools, kindergarten through 9th grade, and when I went to Milton schools, they have signs up at all of their schools, and they have like the orange t-shirts and that entire movement. So we had that. At Parker, I mean, obviously they say like no tolerance, that they have a no tolerance policy, and they say like stop bullying, but it's not like pull us all out of class and have the assembly like they do at Milton.
What about it, Craig?
Yeah, there's a few signs that I've seen that like if you need help, you can call this hotline or
Yeah.
something. I've seen a few posters.
They have that up too. They put the posters up in the hallway. There's one in the on the back side of every bathroom stall, etc. So that say like if you're experiencing like insomnia, like not wanting to go to class because of anxiety, suicidal thoughts, like you can call this number or text this number.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, receptive. I mean, obviously, security measures, you can go to the extreme, as we've seen in our airports and that. And I'm not proposing we do any of this, but how receptive would students be to like clear backpacks, metal detectors? I'm not suggesting we do that, but would they feel like would they feel safer, or would they feel like, boy, we're going to school like almost too protective of an environment? What do you, I guess my question is, what do you think students would be receptive to as far as additional security measures in their schools?
I'm unsure, because I can't speak for the entire student body. I can only speak based on my experiences and my personal beliefs. But I do know that they have implemented the clear backpacks, the barricades, going through security every morning at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And the students have been really upset about it. They've been very vocal on social media about how they disagree with it. So I can tell you that that's their
So they
standpoint.
feel it's more intrusive those
Yes.
types of things, of their privacy and stuff.
Yes, I know I have heard from staff members that years back Parker had mesh backpacks only, and if a student could not afford one, then they were given a mesh backpack. I know I've heard a few people say they're in support of bringing that back, but I don't know at this point if the school district would do that or not, so.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
I just wonder, where was that school that people didn't like?
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the one in Parkland that had the shooting.
Oh.
People have their own ideas of what, like, they want, like the metal detector, but I think that's a good idea, but people would probably not like that. I don't know. It's like invade of their privacy or something like that.
I feel like that's less invasive than a clear backpack.
Yeah.
I'm on the school board out at Parkview, and one of the things that we implemented in the last couple of years was the run, hide, fight, or Alice train. It's a new approach to
Yes.
how the kids are able to take protective measures in case of something serious happening. Have they had that sort of thing in Janesville also? And if they, do you think that that sort of a program would add a little bit more comfort to being able to know what your plan is and have something that you can do to sort of protect yourself if it starts heading down that path?
It's really interesting that you brought that up because I just a few minutes ago received a text from my sister who's a 7th grader at Milton Middle School. They did that training today actually for the first time. So I thought Milton had already picked up on it because Janesville has, and we haven't had an active shooter drill. We've gone through soft lockdowns with the Jakubowski thing that happened last year with medical emergencies, so we know what to do in a soft lockdown and class continues. With a hard lockdown, we had, to my knowledge, one hard lockdown drill this year. I did ask the administration and they said there's been more, so I must have been absent and missed it. But we have not had like an active shooter drill, but I know that our teachers had training with it last week. Some of them were talking about it and that the Gazette had come in. So that was going on, but my sister said that they did their first like experience with that today at Milton Middle School. My other sister is a sophomore at Milton High School, and she said that their teachers are doing professional development with that training right now and that they will be learning as a school how to do that later in the year, which I thought Milton had already implemented.
Well, I would imagine with some of this grant money that's going to become available here very shortly, that there will be some advancements that way, and hopefully there'll be some new equipment that we can use to better secure doors and that sort of thing within schools, so that people have a little more assurance while they're there.
JPD has partnered with a school district, and we developed a video run, hide, fight.
Yep,
That's a mandatory watch for all the kids in the district.
I have seen it.
One of the things too is that you can implement the measures and stuff, and sometimes it can be counterproductive. Because I know the one in Florida, originally what he did was he pulled the fire alarm. So all the kids evacuated their rooms in response to the fire alarm. And then when they found it was an active shooter, then they locked all the doors to the classrooms, and kids that had gone out for the fire drill weren't able to get back into a secure place like that. So, and I'm sure a lot of that stuff as they go along will be worked out, but that was one where it can actually backfire on you.
That
In
scares me.
the days following the Parkland shooting, I met with the Janesville School Superintendent, and that was one of the discussion points that we had, was how to address that fire alarm issue. Make sure a fire alarm is a fire alarm and a shooter is a shooter.
What's the ratio of school resource officers to our student population?
Right. About 5% of my officers are assigned directly to the schools. We have one in each high school, and we have one in each middle school. And then the middle school officers also provide support to the grade schools. So 5.
So are they on campus in middle school, then they're not on campus all day, but they are at the high school level?
They're all assigned to the campus every day.
Right.
full-time. But if they have an assignment at a middle or a grade school, then the middle school officers would leave that campus and take care of that assignment.
Chief Moore, can you describe what school resource officers do? I think a lot of people have a misconception they're only there to be secure. They do many different functions. Can you briefly explain, all the different roles they play in a school?
There is the misconception that they are just armed guards.
Right.
But I will tell you, they are armed and they are in the schools. They are ready to respond immediately to any emergency and also relay that emergency to field units. But beyond that, they help out with counseling sessions if students have concerns about safety in the home, safety in the school. They have built very good relationships with these students, and that's probably a larger part of their work as opposed to just walking the campus and walking the school. And the reason I say that's probably more important, it goes back to this: if we can have students get help when they need help, we can avoid the active shooter circumstances. If we build relationships with these students and they feel comfortable coming to a police officer and say, look, this student friend of mine is threatening to harm somebody, we can intervene, and that's why that is so important.
We have joining us a school board member, Jim Millard. Jim, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we gave everybody a chance to say a few words in the beginning. Is there anything that you would like to say about your thoughts on the issue of guns and school safety?
Well, I didn't hear everybody, so hopefully I won't be repeating. I know that we had taken the voting out of some of the schools, unfortunately not all of the schools. And when we found that out, that there were still 3 schools that were voting, the superintendent and then Kevin Murray and myself, and they talked to Chief Moore too, about they're going to, hopefully by November, there will be no voting in the schools, which is kind of a bittersweet thing because I love to have the kids see the democratic process, but unfortunately, when you have voting, you can get in and you can pretty much roam the whole building. There's no way to literally stop you from going into the building and going further, so they are working on that, so that's a positive. I guess I just wanted to hear more from the students because they're the ones that it's important they feel safe. That's the name of the game.
Well, this has kind of turned into a round table, which is really a nice development.
It is.
Yeah. Janet, I don't believe you had a chance to say anything. Would you like to?
I have plenty to say, too. I'm Janet LaBrie, and those 2 kids on the Gazette, on the lower courthouse, when we had that demonstration, the 2 kids holding the signs, those are my grandkids. And they participated in that, and then they were at Traxler Park as well, rallying with all of us. One of the things we're not talking about here today is AR-15s. Why aren't we talking about those? That's the issue, isn't it? That's the biggest issue. You can do damage with other kinds of weapons, but you can't do the same kind of damage with those. And there's a sense that we feel that we have to do all these other measures, but we can't do the thing that will be most effective. And that is to get rid of those as a weapon that normal people can get. When we were at the event you were at the other day, there was plenty of discussion about those as military weapons, totally unnecessary for citizens, normal people to use, not hunting guns. And at least we're beginning to get a sense of that separation from what is a hunting gun or a protective handgun or whatever versus what is a military type of weapon. Why should people be having those? And why is that the stopping point in this issue? And it seems to me, not to make too light of this, but I will anyhow, if we can't get rid of AR-15s, make them illegal, not allow them to be present, maybe we should get rid of white males.
Jim, how do you feel? Next.
Can I respond to that? I appreciate Janet's viewpoint on that without getting too political. However, I really think locally, because if we're going to depend on the federal government or Congress to solve this issue, I think we're going to be waiting a long time. I think locally, what can we do amongst ourselves? What can we do to improve school safety? I agree, the gun control is very important, but and as our state legislators have said, they're running into all kinds of resistance. So what do? Do we just say, well, they're not going to pass these laws, so we don't do anything? Or do we try to do what we can do? And I'm of the view that we've got to do what we can possibly have control over. Depending on our state legislature and our federal government to take care of this issue, they could be debating this, and they have for many years. It could be 5 or 10 more years. In the meantime, we're going to still have these incidences. So I think what we can do locally is what we should focus on. We should put the pressure on our legislators, state and federal, to change gun laws, but what can I, as a local city council member, do to try to improve this? What can Chief Moore do? What can the school board, Jim Millard, what can we do to try to do it, steps we can take? And I think that's what we should focus on.
Well, I agree with Jim that we need to do what we can do locally. But it's quite amazing to me to learn, that I have learned, that most of the people in this state and other states in our country don't want those kinds of weapons to be sold, the AR-15s. They don't want them around. Even up in northern Wisconsin, somebody spoke to that at the event the other day. People don't want it. But apparently some of our elected representatives do want them. And that's another area of pressure. I agree, we need to do what we can so our students are safe. But the area, why are we not, as adults in this country, as voting citizens, doing more to say to them, stop it? I mean, I appreciate that students are organizing, and you guys really need to keep it up. You need to put the pressure on, you need to keep organizing, but we adults can't stand there and let you all do the heavy lifting. We need to be really putting the pressure on our elected officials. And we need to elect people who share our beliefs and values, that these kinds of weaponry are just outrageous to have citizens walking around with them on their shoulders in public. Sometimes going around the park when we're having demonstrations. That's outrageous.
Well, I mean, that's when I started, I said this has got to be a multi-pronged approach. School safety is important. The school districts, obviously, anytime you can give them $100 million, they want to take it, if nothing else, to free up some money for something else. So, and I agree, school safety is very important. The teachers and the principals all told me that getting mental health in the school would help immensely, because we do know the kids that are having trouble. Every day they can tell you the children that are most at risk, and if there was an availability for mental health services in the school, that would be such a bonus to get them the help they needed. But the other part that we don't talk about, you're right, is because it's a political lift, and until the change in who's in office, then it won't occur. I mean, we couldn't even on the assembly floor talk about universal background checks. We couldn't even get it to a vote. So I think that's pretty obvious when it's 90% people want universal background checks, and we're not allowed to bring it. We can't get it to the floor for a vote. I think that indicates that it's going to be a political heavy lift. So
Who's to blame for that, or who prevents that?
Leadership, who's ever in leadership in the Assembly or Senate, or in this case, the governor also. So we had a bill, and we tried to bring it forward, and it was just, it's not allowed for discussion. They didn't want to take a vote on it.
And Yuri, I will go a little further with this. I was at a listening session with one of our congressmen not in this district, a couple of weeks ago, and that congressman said it is not Congress's job to take care of this. It's a state job. But yet when we were on the floor at the Senate, they said it's Congress's job. So we need to clearly define who is in charge of this. I personally feel it's up to our state to take care of Wisconsin. I believe in local control, and I think Wisconsin has a strong responsibility to take care of that. And the same congressman also said that an AR-15 was a hunting weapon. I would dispute that. My husband is an avid sportsman. He does not have an AR-15. And I asked him, I said, do you know anyone that uses those for hunting? And he said no. He said he explained that the bullets are a different size. They're meant just to do damage. And if you are hunting for an animal that you're going to sell the hide is going to be useless if you use an AR-15 on those. So we need to have a clear definition of what is a hunting gun. Who is responsible for making these laws? Because everyone seems to be pointing their fingers the other way. No one wants to step to the plate. And as Deb and I can attest, we tried to bring those issues forward, and they were shut down.
One thing that Deb mentioned, I've heard this before, and I agree with it. Mental health is very important. What do we need to do to improve resources in our schools that kids that have mental issues can have some sort of, I know we have counselors, but do we need to do more? Do we need more resources? Do we need to have, what sort of things can we do to make sure a kid doesn't go to school and he's got all kinds of pent up hostility and aggressiveness? And what can the students do, like reporting to other teachers or the counselors? What things are we not doing that we could do?
I would love to address that if I may.
Yes.
My name is Portia. I am the president of a Right to Life Animal and Equine Sanctuary here in Janesville. I'm a mother who has 5 children who have been through the school system. I have the last 2 who are finishing up their schooling and whatnot. I think what we might be missing is, I think we need to consider a different way to go about some of these things. Yes, some of the laws need to be changed, but this is not a quick fix. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. I think what we need to do is get to the heart of what the problem is. Not all of these kids have mental illnesses. Some of these kids are just, excuse me for saying so, but pissed off. Some of these kids have, like you said, they have pent up energy. They have nothing to do after school. And I want to address a couple of things. I think the number one thing that we're dealing with kids is stress. And what I did is I kind of cut that up into 4 categories that I'd like to bring up. Number 1 is bullying. Bullying is so bad right now. I have a child that is in 5th grade right now that has gone through severe bullying. And though the school is doing what they can, it's simply not enough. And I think we need to come together as parents, and we need to work together. We need more people in those schools helping out, more people on the buses, because my child gets beat up on the bus, and so do other children. My child's not the only one. There's a lot, okay? So that's one thing. We need to really work harder on getting that nipped in the bud, and we need to bring more parents and perhaps more staff on board with this. The next thing is we need to talk about homework. My son was a freshman a couple years ago at Parker High School. And I remember him coming home one night, and I sat at the table with my son who had homework in all of his subjects. And we sat there for 6 hours. 6 hours on a Friday night. And I was like, this is ridiculous. In the meantime, he had come home every night before then with homework. I thought, my gosh, education is key, but people, we cannot cram a lifetime of experiences into 18 years of a child's life. We can't do it. That's what we have colleges for, and life. They need to experience life and learn that way as well. You can't get it all in 18 years. And I've seen homework increase through the years. I'm going to be 51 years old next month. In my mind, it's a year. No, I've seen a lot of increases, and honestly, as an adult, drives me mad. I'm thinking, I already went to school. Why am I having to go through this again with my child? But you can't just let them flail on their own. You gotta help them. Okay, so that's homework. That's number 2. Number 3 is just basic peer pressure. Okay, I would say number 3 and number 4 are together: competition and peer pressure. A certain level of competition is healthy, but too much is unhealthy. Let me put it to you this way. Schools would love to see all the students get straight A's. Parents would love to see their students get straight A's, but that's not reality. Not all of our children are straight A students. Not all of our children learn at the same level. They learn at different levels. And I think if we have to create competition, the students need to be in competition with themselves and not other students. Because you take a child that's like a C student, they can't make the grade, they can't be straight A, they're out. They're done. They're like, well, I can't do it, so screw it. Sorry to put it that way, but that's how a teen is gonna address you that way and say that. Forget it, it's not worth it. But if they're in competition with themselves, well, maybe I could do a little better on this next time. It really changes their mindset, okay?
So what you're saying, that gun violence is a bad resolution to a problem?
Yes, I'm thinking that some of these kids don't have a way out. I think some of these kids feel like nobody's in their corner. These kids need validation. They need a purpose. They need a reason to exist. They need to feel their existence is important. A lot of these kids feel like they're just shadows in the background. Like their existence is nothing. They're nobody. Their voices aren't heard. We need to give them a voice. One of the things that I think would be exceptionally beneficial would be after-school programs. And I know that Janesville has some of them. Here's the problem. There's not enough, and most of these cost money. And a lot of these parents and kids do not have the money to get their kids in these programs. So I'm proposing a little bit of something, and I'm hoping other people will get on board too. I am starting an after-school program. It's actually started already. I actually have one of my volunteers here and another parent who is here that also hopefully will speak on it, whose children have volunteered recently as well. I think if these kids had something else to do, they wouldn't be getting in trouble. If they had another way to vent, and I'm going to tell you right now, social workers don't always cut it. They need a place, they need a way to express themselves. They need a place to vent freely and not be judged. Some of these kids have done some bad things and made bad choices. Should they be judged for the rest of their lives because they made a mistake, because they got arrested, because they had pot, because they stole something? No, they made a mistake. It can be corrected, but they need positive reinforcement.
You want to say a couple of words about your program?
I do. Thank you. Basically what I do is I rescued horses from slaughter. I offer them a lifetime to stay at my facility so they're never at risk again. Some of them were at risk and I got them off Craigslist, and others I actually had pulled off meat trucks, one of which a mare that came to me with broken ribs and pregnant, which I didn't know she was pregnant. What I'm offering is for some students, I'm willing to take on some students to come after school. It's free. They can come and they can volunteer their time. They can work off their aggressions, their energy. They can spend time and bond with the animals and the horses, which is highly therapeutic. And I would like to give an example. Is that okay?
Yes.
I have Brittany here with me today. She is a mother that we kind of reached out to each other the other night. I was welcoming more help, and I don't know if you want to explain the situation briefly.
Yeah, my son got in trouble the other day with the law. He's 14. He's been having struggles. Counseling isn't helping. I don't know. He's got some issues going on. And she asked if I knew anyone strong who could help her on the ranch. And I was like, oh yeah, I know just the guy. So I sent my son and his best friend, who he got in trouble with, and they went to the ranch to volunteer for a few hours. And they were so happy and refreshed when I picked them up, and he wanted to go help more. And I think it made him feel good that he was able to do something positive. And he just lit up, and I have my screensaver right now with my son on it with the horse, because I hadn't seen him this happy in so long. And just to meet the horses and get to help out and get some exercise, I think made a big difference. He slept better, he was happy, he felt proud of himself, and here he is with one of the horses. The boys just loved it. And she told me this idea that was inspired from her time with my son and his friend. And I just think it's an amazing idea.
I spent 4 hours yesterday with these boys raking, and let me tell you, my 50-year-old body is hating me today. These boys raked. They got to use an auger, which they'd never used before. They got to be around horses, which they had never been around before, and they said it was such an amazing, exhilarating experience. And what the children say to me, I allow them to talk freely. They can talk about their issues if they want or whatever. It stays with me. But the one thing I'm going to say is Haven said he felt really bad for giving you a hard time. It made him very sad sometimes. So that's the only thing I'm going to allow. But I don't mind the children being who they are, and I think it's really important that we do that. Let them be who they are. If they do a swear word, so what? You would never know that her son and his best friend were arrested the night before. These were not bad kids. These kids worked their buns off. They worked hard. They were hilarious. We had a great time, and they said that I was one of the nicest.
The nicest lady ever.
I wasn't called the grumpy old troll, which is nice.
Well, and there could be other nonprofits in the area where people could volunteer.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that, maybe horses and animals and farm work isn't for kids, but there's, we have our performance arts. We've got all kinds of things that kids can do. But look, local people, you need to open up your businesses or whatever it is that you have to offer to kids and make it free. These kids can't afford these programs, and they're getting into trouble. But I know in her case, these kids came for 4 hours. They were wiped out by the time they left, but they were happy, and they hugged me, and it felt really good to see.
They hugged you like 3 times. He barely hugs anybody. He was so happy.
It was amazing. I mean, it really made me tearful, because I was like, wow, this helped these kids, and it just made me feel really great. So I am going to extend that. We'll probably do some weekdays along with Sundays that I'm going to open up. If you're interested, you can reach out to me on Facebook or contact Yuri. And I also have another volunteer here. I don't know if you want to say anything. Her and her father have been here a couple times, if you guys.
Well, we talked earlier, but yeah.
Oh, you did? You get this?
Yeah,
story?
yeah,
Oh,
we got
okay.
your-
I'm
we got
sorry.
your-
I was
Well, they
so
spoke very
late.
briefly, but did you want to talk about what you thought about this experience?
It's fun. She's a really good person to talk to. She's just like another mom, basically.
I really appreciate that. These are amazing kids. They're all amazing kids. They're smart, they're bright, they're brilliant. And I think if we encourage that in our kids and our students, you guys are going to see a big change. You're going to see a big change. If these kids have something to look forward to be excited about, how can there not be positive change?
And it's volunteering that could help on a resume for a job.
It
It's character
can.
building.
Character building.
Exercise.
These boys told me they felt so good when they left. They said, I need more of this. And I said, well, I got plenty of it.
His wrists are sore today. He's all upset about it.
Yeah, they were working the auger. They said it was like wrestling a motorcycle.
Susanna, what do you think? Is this something that makes sense to you?
It makes sense to me, but another thing is I know, having been in high school, that kids who are overly involved are not perfect little angels either. Just my observations that a lot of them have gotten in trouble as well. But overall, I really do enjoy your idea.
I do think it really seems like we're heading down the right path here. When you connect up, there are a great deal of resources out in our community. It's nice to see these kids get plugged into some of those resources, and hopefully by following your lead, other people will step up and help address some of this problem. Because you see, sitting around the table here, state legislators and local legislators and school board officials who really care a great deal and are working very hard to address some of these issues. And I think once we get the community engaged, I think we're going to make some real progress here.
And we need to work together and work harder on making sure that these students have something to do after school. something to do after school is really imperative. And even on the weekends, a lot of these kids are getting in trouble on the weekends. So let's work together and find a way that they can do something rather than the kids get bored. I've got an 11-year-old and a 17-year-old. Luckily, my eldest is a gamer. He never leaves his bed. But, you know, I worry about my 11-year-old sometimes because he's a little bit more high-strung. You know, he gets out there. But look, we can do it together. We can work together. We can come up and create programs. There's so much, thank you, sweetie. There's so much things that we can do together as a team, as a community. Get our kids off the street. Our crime is going to go down significantly if we can do this. And we won't have to worry that much about gun laws, even though I do agree they need to change, and they do. But until then, what can we do right now? I think Jim's question was great. What could we do right now as a community? And this is what we can do right now as a community.
It's a nice idea, but it's not going to affect that many kids. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but and how
You're saying it's not a universal solution for every problem?
I think that's what I'm saying.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and I agree, I can't take on every student. However, every child has a passion. Every student has something that they love to do. So if we can find what they love to do and get them tapped into something, I think it could help almost every student. My program won't. My program's going to help a small handful of kids. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to get other people to get on the bandwagon and start pulling in some of these kids and taking them on and helping them through things and giving them an avenue to, you know, vent and do something, maybe do something positive. Maybe they won't have a reason to vent, you know? Maybe they have art and different skills. Maybe they like to build. Maybe they like to weld. Who knows? All the kids are different. And like I said, not all, I agree with you, not all the students are gonna like horses. My one son that likes to sit in his bed and play video games hates them. But I do think that we can work together as a community and find something else for them. Because I think a lot of it is them being suppressed. Like they can't be who they are. Because there's too many, I don't know what is the word I'm looking for? Maybe stigma on how a child needs to be, act, dress, you know, that type of thing. What they should like, what they shouldn't like. You know, why not let them be them, who they are?
One of the things too, and I know earlier we were talking about the clear backpacks and things like that. And I realize there's a difference between students and real life. You know, if you go to a Packer game, you got to go through metal detectors. You go to a Badger game, you go through a metal detector. I like NASCAR races. To get into a NASCAR race, I need a clear backpack. So it's things, I realize you feel like your freedoms are taken away from you, but when you look at the big picture, once you get out of school, you're going to be facing a lot of the same things. And I know with the discussion from Saturday, some of the students were saying too, if they're going to have to go through metal detectors, the time that it takes them to get through metal detectors, you know, are they going to have to get to school an hour earlier? So I can sympathize, you know, on that respect. But it's something that later on in life you're going to have to go through the same exact things. One of the other comments earlier where Deb was talking about the mental health providers in the schools. There's a difference between the mental health provider and the counselors.
Yes.
The counselors right now, their main thing, and you guys brought that up Saturday, was to career path the students to college or whatever. And they don't have time or the resources to do the mental health issues. Another part is the disparity in health insurance itself. Because there's a whole lot of difference between if you go to urgent care, you get so many visits or whatever. Mental health, you get very few visits and then you're done. And that's if you can get the insurance. The other part too is that a lot of the kids that don't have, there's different programs there, but it takes so long for them to get into the program that it doesn't help with the problem right off the bat. You know, in the long run it does, but if a child or somebody's in crisis right now, that length of time that it takes them to get in and to see the help, something else could happen down the road there. So I think getting the providers or the mental health people in the schools is going to be a good step forward to help alleviate some of those problems.
Well, you know, Tom, with the ACA, there is parity. There shouldn't be any differential between mental and physical health. And so you can, but we do have a problem that sometimes we can't if you were in a school district, a clinic set up in a school district, can't get Medicaid payments, so we need to work on that. Also, we just need to fund the schools better. Let them use the discretion, if they had excess dollars. Right now our schools are having, tighten their belts and increase class sizes and things like that. We just need to fund them better. But one of the things we can do, if the legislature can find the fortitude to do it, is just make sure that mental health clinics could receive Medicaid payments within the school districts and clinics.
Okay.
And like I said, every teacher and every administrator I talked to said it would be such an asset for a school district or a school to be able to have access to mental health care in the school. When I sat on the school board many years ago, the first things you cut are social workers and then counselors, and I know we talk about counselors just helping get arrangements for college or whatever, but we keep cutting. The very first things you cut is the ancillary services and the things that keep students safer in their schools.
So Tom was talking about some of these kids, their insurance and whatnot, they either don't have it or they don't have the funding. Is there some kind of way that the town or city or whatever can maybe apply for grants for emergency situations like that, so that there is funding available for emergency? Like you were saying, what if a student needs help now? What if they do? Perhaps what we need to do is look into getting some kind of funding immediately in place. That way, all the parents or the school has to do is get the child to the emergency assistance without having to wait for all of that stuff. Obviously, we can't wait when it's in that dire of a situation, and it needs to be addressed immediately.
But then wouldn't the entire country want said grant?
Well, there's plenty of grant programs out there. We just need to get a hold of them. What if they do? There's plenty of investors out there. There's plenty of other people out there that will get the money. And honestly, I think government needs to step up and take some responsibility and come up with the money. We need to have the money to do this. This is our future. It's the future of our kids. This is our lives. How would any of us like it if our children came home and, of course, I guess it wouldn't matter when we're dead, but killed us and our family and a bunch of other people, all because government or whoever didn't want to come up with the funding? This is essential. It's essential. This isn't something that should be put on the back burner.
Are you talking about affordable care or Medicare for everyone?
Possibly, but like with the grant, in theory it's a good idea, but if Janesville gets that, everyone else will want to have it. Like, what makes Janesville different from every other city in the U.S.?
But what's wrong with that, though?
I don't think there's something wrong with it. It's just the issues that we're talking about right now with, how they were trying to pass legislation in the state and then they said that's Congress's job. Or talking about insurance. Everything brings it back to a federal issue instead of a state or a local issue.
Janice?
Well, there is money available with the program that the state did pass for the school safety. That's a grant program. And mental health care is one of the items on there. However, it's a competitive bidding process too for those grants. So a lot of schools, and I don't know for sure how many, but some do have mental health care in their schools already. I know it's come up when I've been at roundtable events with school boards, and it's not adequate because so many kids have issues today that in the past did not. I asked what's causing it, and they said it's a number of issues. Trauma can cause it, instability in the home because of drug use, several factors out there. And it's pretty hard to have a safety net for everybody. In a perfect world, yeah, we'd love to see that. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse all the time that these kids are slipping through the cracks where we didn't experience these kinds of issues years ago. We didn't have the drug abuse that we have today. And parents are working more jobs. They're not home with their kids. They aren't there to help them with their homework every night. So there are just a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And I wish it was as simple as just putting the mental health money out there, but a lot of issues that our society has kind of tipped over. And we need to address that too. It's not easy.
with respect to this grant, that's just a one-year grant. So it really
Right
speaks
now,
more
that's
to,
not-
facilities and equipment versus,
Infrastructure.
ongoing programs.
And I think Deb had mentioned earlier, there are no parameters right now for those loans. I talked to a school board member who had checked into getting a parking lot that was on the same side of the street as the school. Because right now it's considered a safety issue because the parking lot's across the street from the school. They said that would be an acceptable reason
Just
for safety
appears-
purposes in a school. So I think you've got to tighten this up a little bit. And that's up to the state to do that. You need to have a little bit tighter guidelines on what is permissible and what isn't.
But the money's supposed to get out the door
Out the door in a
immediately.
year, yeah.
So, in 3,000 plus schools, if you consider private and public schools, so, and no parameters, like you said, if a parking lot is a safety concern, is lighting a parking lot a safety,
Yeah, it could
who
be.
knows what the money will be used
Whatever you
for.
perceive your issue to be might be acceptable, but it's up to one person to make that decision. And, we see Medicaid issues all over the state. Medicaid does not reimburse the providers adequately, so a lot of providers are kind of stepping away from Medicare. I have nursing homes that are closing in my district because they can't get reimbursement from Medicaid. So it's a whole lot of issues. I wish it was simpler, but we need to find a better process. And there again, nobody wants to step to the plate and say, yeah, that's my job to do it. But we keep working at that, but it's very slow going. Elections are coming up. That's one of the best ways I can think of to make change in our state. And not to get political on you, but that will make some difference because right now there is federal money available to our state for health care, and we've rejected it. We've not accepted it for the last 4 or 5 years. And that's to the tune of about $350 million a year. That could, by accepting that federal funding, it would free up what we are using right now for health care for other issues. It could be mental health. It could be for children's programs, education in general, which funding's been cut so drastically. So,
But I do appreciate your
priorities.
thinking outside the box. Before I got on school board, I used to go to the school board meetings and talk about intramurals and put some money to intramurals so that students that weren't going to be able to play basketball or football or could have the opportunity to use the school facilities and put some money towards that. But again, you had to put money towards it, so it never happened. But in a small town where I grew up, intramurals, everybody did it because they were always co-ed and they were just fun and everybody was doing them.
Chief Moore, I know you have to leave, and council member, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
I'll go back to my opening comment. We need to have students contacting a trusted adult or law enforcement when you have concerns about your safety or have information that a person may be ready to harm someone. Again, with this recent suicide Snapchat, 1 in 30, one person out of 30 contacted us. We need to change that, 29 out of 30 contacting us. That'll make a difference.
Thank you, Chief. Council member?
I just want to thank you, Yuri, and everybody for this opportunity. I've learned more than I knew before on what some of the major things are, and I think it's going to take a community effort with our city, state, parents, and students to get something achieved here to improve our situation. So I'm optimistic we're going in the right direction by having this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm kind of curious to see what the comments are saying, but at the same time, I can't see it right now.
Thanks for not being on your phone, right? Anybody else would like to say anything in kind of as we wrap things up?
I'd like to comment,
Yes.
Yuri. It's Portia. I'd like to thank you for opening up your equine facility because I know that equine care has been phenomenal in helping people with mental health, emotional issues. I used to serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee. It was a huge issue. They wanted to be able to get money from the state so more veterans could go to equine settings. And we finally did come up with some money, and it wasn't huge, but we had 3 or 4 different equine businesses that were willing to work with veterans, and it's very beneficial. I went to 3 Gates in Stoughton. They work with mentally disabled children or physically disabled children so they can learn to ride. And it's an excellent way to get mental and emotional relief. So if you have friends that have facilities, invite them to join you with us. And it may not always be horses, but even just companion dogs, different animals are really a stress reliever for people that have issues, and it's a good start. Thank you.
And I've seen what it's done with people that have come to my facility, even adults that were feeling down or low or whatever. I'd be like, hey, just come on out for a little bit. Trust me, come on out for a little bit. And they leave feeling recharged and just feeling better about themselves. They did something great. And what people don't understand is that equines actually have a mental, I don't know how to explain this, but they connect with you.
Yeah, right.
There is a connection that they have, and I know dogs do and cats do, but this is very different. And perhaps some of my volunteers can explain it, but you probably understand it yourself. It's quite different. I remember a day, it was last summer, I was really sad about something. And I went outside into the pasture and I just threw myself on the ground and I was crying. 50-year-old woman having a little crying attack on the ground. And I felt these little noses around me, and it was 4 of my biggest horses stood around me with their noses just sniffing, and they knew something was wrong. They didn't try to step on me. They didn't try to hurt me. They just stood around me and grazed around me. And after about an hour and a half of my little tantrum and I started to walk in the house, they all followed me. It's just amazing. They feel that, and people don't understand that. And this is why I do what I do. Partially, but mostly because horses are incredibly feeling, sentient beings, and they don't deserve to be slaughtered. So they have so much to offer human beings that it goes beyond any realm that I can begin to explain to you. So I thank you for that.
Well, how about we'll wrap it up on that note, and I'll just say a word in conclusion. Thanking our audience. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. We had this conversation that went from a listening session and became a roundtable conversation, although I suppose rectangular. So first of all, thanks to Italian House and Edmund for allowing us to take up the place for, I think, turned out to be a very important and useful conversation. And it really seems that everyone has something to do. Whether you're chief of police, and that means that there's preparation efforts that need to be underway, and we as residents need to reach out when we are aware of a problem, and legislators need to pass the right legislation. Everyone's got something we can do to increase safety in our schools, and that's what it's all about. Thank you so much for watching Janesville Community Page. Please remember to share this video, and thanks. This is Yuri Rashkin. Bye-bye.